brother Ashik. Finally, we have you online on video, and we know who's behind the next Muslim Bitcoin Summit.
Alhamdulillah.
So,
Assalamu alaikum, Brother
nice
Bashar.
to see you.
Likewise. Thank you for inviting me to your
Yeah.
show.
So, I think for the people who don't know you yet, maybe you can tell us a little bit first about yourself.
Sure. So, Bismillah.
Yeah.
So my name is Ashik Usman. I come from a computer science background and enterprise IT. Before that, I had an interest in art and design at sort of in my early formative years up to college, and then I switched over to computing. Um, I used to have an ambition to develop my own games when I was small. Um, I also sort of while I was young, I had developed a passion for writing. I used to write my own stories, and that sort of continued as well as I grew older. So I spent about just over 23 years at one of the big four professional services companies, like an audit company. And then in the last 3.5 years, I moved to a completely different industry in the metals and minerals mining industry.
Mm.
In the enterprise IT space. So as a former developer, and then over the years, I switched more over to solutions architecture. Usually involves sort of global um, sort of multi-vendor projects, complex projects, bit of project management and leading teams.
Yeah, mashallah. You were born and raised in London?
Yes, it was in London. It was Birmingham, so it's like second city.
Mm.
My dad moved over from then East Pakistan
Mm.
in 1960, um, and then yeah, so I was born about another 15 years later after he brought my family over, my mom and my older brothers over after the Bangladesh Independence War in 1971. So they all
Oh.
came over in 1972. So yeah,
Mhm.
Alhamdulillah, been quite privileged that I was the first in my family to go to university um, and be able to have that education. Um, but yeah, it's been a journey for me. So I moved to London after graduating
Yeah.
in 1999. Got my first sort of proper job, and then I remember sort of quite early on um, my formative kind of madrasa training about things, the importance of zakah,
Mm.
and Alhamdulillah, from the moment I started working. I was kind of made sure that I've been paying, my zakat correctly, and with that, sort of learning more about, making sure that things like nisab level and how to calculate it, sort of back in the sort of early on, and it wasn't until about another 3 or so years later that I was looking to buy my first property, and
Yeah.
that's when I started looking more into home finance options, and I wasn't quite happy with um, what's available. It was very little that was available back then, apart from conventional mortgages. And with limited knowledge as well at that time, even though I knew there was something not quite right, I went ahead with buying my first property, and I
What
spent
you
the
mean?
best.
What do you mean by not right? You mean like the riba issue?
That's
The
right.
interest?
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I always knew that riba was haram.
Yeah.
But with the lack of knowledge and um, the general kind of consensus was, oh, if it's your first property and if it's you got no other choice, then like the rule of necessity that
Mm.
you can buy. So I was obviously lacking in education, and I just went with whatever the general sort of consensus was at that time.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
almost immediately I felt not quite right about it, and I spent the next several years looking into it, researching, learning about it, and sort of went into that rabbit hole of learning about Islamic finance, looking at the options available from the so-called Islamic finance industry. um, there were initially one or two options, but then that grew for a while in terms of different, both mainstream banks as well as not so mainstream banks were um, sort of providing or offering so-called diminishing musharaka
mm,
options to buy. And then I very nearly went with one of those. I very nearly switched over,
mm.
and then my research showed that no, this is more or less the same thing. It's just they're using some Arabic words to kind of cover it and making it look like it's, but the underlying structure is more or less the same. When you look at the contracts involved and you combine the contracts, it's more or less the ribawi um,
Yeah.
sort of transaction. And then started looking more into it, and then the whole sort of almost philosophical kind of perspective on money as well.
Mm,
So at that time, I was looking at a lot of just learning about how money, the system works. Some of the early books I was looking into, like Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad, Poor Dad, looking at Mike Maloney's stuff around gold and silver, as well as a gentleman called Jim Sinclair, who's famous for advocating for gold. And it wasn't until around 2006, 2007, I met Brother Tariq Al Diwani for the first time
yeah,
at an
mashallah.
Islamic conference, and he gave a presentation, bought his book, and that really changed my life. I
But you
really got.
already had
Yeah.
bought the property
That's
by
right.
by
Yeah,
then.
and I was trying to get sort of find ways, how do I come out of it? What
Right.
are my options available? I think that's where some confusion, lack of proper knowledge, and not knowing who to speak with the correct kind of understanding. Apart from, okay, riba is haram, but then I was like, what do I do? Do I just sell, and what are my options? And it just became more clear the more I mean, Brother Tarek's book was really kind of opened my eyes in terms
Mm,
of how Riba just touches everything. And I just felt more motivated to really do something about it, and
mm,
not just read about it and learn about it. And because it was, up until then, it was kind of quite academic almost.
mm.
And then we had the 2008 financial crisis, and then followed soon after, my daughter, my first child, was born 2009, and she was almost like the catalyst for driving me to take action. So I said, look, I don't know what the options, I mean, I do know what the options are for me at the time, but I wasn't happy with any of those options. And I just said, look, I'm going to sell up and just rent for the, until I work out sort of what to do. So I had my own little mini hijra at that time. I sold, I moved closer to London, and I was just renting for the next 7 years. And
Yeah.
during those years, I was a gold and silver bug. Um, I got involved with minting a sort of a silver dirham coin. That was a project that I was working with brother Tarek. I was very fortunate to have met him a few times, and he was my mentor as well as a really good friend. Became very close, and he invited me to work on the project, and I learned a lot about sound money.
Amazing.
Um, and yeah, it's just an appreciation of how gold has been used for thousands of years, and to this day,
Mm,
how it is still being used, although obviously not as it was before in terms of medium of exchange. But there are places still around the world where people are transacting and buying goods and services for gold as well as silver. And I think all of that kind of helped me in terms of when I discovered or first heard of Bitcoin, and that was on the Max Kaiser show back in 2011. So not too long after Satoshi kind of announced it to the world. And
I
he,
will ask you about
yeah,
Bitcoin in a minute,
yes,
but
no
I
problem.
would like to ask you before. Uh, how did you feel? Like, what when you were paying back the mortgage, and after that, when you sold, you obviously sold your property
Mhm.
before finishing the loan, right?
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
So the,
So
the
what was what were you how did you feel after you sold the property? I assume you sold it in 2008 and the prices were down of
Yes, it was
property prices.
2009 when by the time actually did, completed the selling of the house.
Yeah.
And just kind of leading up to that, having found sort of no satisfactory um, solution to the problem of home finance, I kind of resorted to like, okay, I've got a conventional mortgage. The best thing I could do is just try to just buy as quickly as possible, pay off the mortgage so that I'm out of riba.
Yeah.
And during that time, I realized, look, it could take me another, who knows, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. What's going to happen? I mean, I could just die before then. So I don't want to like leave the dunya like in this situation, and
Yeah.
that sort of also helped me make that decision to say, look, I need to sell. And going back
Though
to your
you had the fatwa that allowed you to do that, right? And I think like many brothers in the West are using these fatwas to buy houses through banks. But
That's right.
how do the other people in the West feel about this issue?
I think it's probably fair to say that majority of people have almost resigned to or accepted. Um, for them, that's the reality, and the alternative, either they um, probably can't see the alternative, or when they look at the alternative, they look at it from a surface value and they say, oh, it's more expensive anyway if I move to this so-called Islamic mortgage. And others like me who looked at the Islamic mortgage and were like, hang on, it doesn't look right. I don't mind paying more if it really was Islamic. If it was, truly, genuinely Islamic, then I would, I would do that. And that's why I very almost at one point I very nearly switched over. But when I
Yeah.
realized actually it's pretty much the same thing, then I might as well pay the mortgage off as soon as possible and come out. So I think
Mm.
a lot of other people possibly also feel like that. But also, as you mentioned, the fatwa, where the fatwa is given that if it's out of necessity, if it's your family home, then it's okay. But the more I looked at the behavior of generally people, I saw that even the lifestyle, right? If you want to pay off your mortgage quickly, then you probably would be living a more frugal lifestyle and want to not sort of spend maybe on flashy cars and expensive vacations because you want to use up your money to sort of buy the property and get rid of the mortgage. But I found in reality, as families grow, you have children, they grow older, you need a bigger house, so you get a bigger mortgage, and
Yeah.
it's like an endless vicious cycle, and then you end up passing this mortgage to your children,
Yeah.
and it's like intergenerational thing which you can't come out of, you can't escape.
Yeah.
So
This is
for me, yeah, yeah,
what I like realize from other brothers, also in the Arab world, where they started with the first mortgage, and then they never stopped because they took for their car mortgage, for their work, for their like
yeah,
project, even for decorations inside the house, and
yeah,
it never
that's
stopped. And
that's right.
some of them unfortunately went bankrupt because of that.
Subhanallah. And
SubhanAllah.
it also doesn't stop there because they a lot of people I know, they bought second or third properties.
Mm.
and buy to let for renting out for as a business or a rental income. So like you said, it's very difficult once you're in that situation. It can be very difficult. I mean, even for me personally, it took me 7 years. Even though I wasn't enjoying it, I was actively trying to come out of it. It still took me a while before I was able to come out. And Alhamdulillah, since then, I've not got into, I managed to come out. And over the next few years, I managed to find a shared ownership scheme that
Mm.
allowed me to purchase a property and be able to staircase my way without involving any sort of ribawi kind of conventional mortgage, alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah.
But having said that, I truly understand some families,
Mm.
it can be very difficult to be able to do something like what I just did, or I did those years ago. They could be in a very, it could put their family in a very desperate situation.
Mm.
So I think it's an individual case by case situation, I think.
Yeah, for sure. But I mean, like changing the lifestyle is a big step or a big factor that that can help one to not only to escape riba in this case, but also maybe to accumulate capital for other important things in life. And
Absolutely, absolutely.
unfortunately, we are losing this kind of capitalistic um, uh, character of us, because in Islam we always don't prefer the ajila. We don't see that from an Islamic point of view. It's not good to be always in consume, and israf um, is a big sin. So when you are not in israf, then it means you are accumulating capital for something good that will maybe lead to you being an owner of a project that employs people, etc. So yeah, it's but what did happen when you went back to renting? Was it difficult?
Um, because it took me a while to make the decision and take the action, I think I have to say, Alhamdulillah, the first thing was once I sold the house and I moved out and I moved to a rental property, it was such a relief.
Mm,
Um, I mean, on paper, I was actually paying more. The whole thing was costly. One was I sold at more closer to the bottom of,
mm,
because of the 2008. It was the aftermath of the 2008 crisis. I sold
mm,
2009, and I kind of, in the back of my head, I was like, is it going to continue like this or is it going to go up? But I had already made my decision. I said, no, I have to come out of this. And it was like the immediate relief that I felt. It's very difficult to explain. It's almost like this huge weight has gone off my shoulder, and even though I had moved closer to the London towns, I was kind of living on the outskirts
mm,
and of sort of the London sort of. Because London's obviously, you've got the central London and then it's made up of lots of towns,
mm,
and I came a bit closer so that I can be closer to work and easier to commute, and also closer to the community as well. There's Masaji, then I was kind of a little bit outside, so it became more expensive, and at the same time, I just couldn't explain at the time. Um, it's probably just the barakah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that I was able to do that. I was able to sell, make a move, and still be able to look after my family, alhamdulillah. And
yeah,
it's just the barakah is just, I think the analogy is where you could be earning a lot in terms of fiat, and yet complain after each end of the month saying I don't have enough to pay my bills and everything, because like you said earlier about the overconsumption, your lifestyle
Yeah,
could be such that there is no barakah in your money,
yeah,
whereas if there's barakah, then with less money you can make it last longer and
yeah.
fulfill all your needs.
And
Alhamdulillah.
it's often like an internal um, issue that you change your perception and you feel the barakah. Yeah, it's totally
Alhamdulillah.
that that
Alhamdulillah.
we should, as Muslims, always revisit and reflect about our perceptions, so that God helps us in finding barakah in small things, and as you said, like one doesn't have to um, travel and take luxury or very far away vacations. One can enjoy like God's creation even if he's like watching a fly in his house. Yeah.
Subhanallah.
Like
Yeah, that's so true.
subhanallah, and sometimes you see it with the kids that they have this a pure perception of the world, and they see enjoyment in everything, and this is
Absolutely.
something that we should always think about. So how did you become interested in gold and eventually in Bitcoin?
Right.
This
So
is
I think the interest in gold and silver, precious metals, it's while I was still in my first property and researching both Islamic finance and looking at home finance options. And one of the things that I think a lot of people struggled with is where you have fiat and you're trying to save, even whether it's for a car or a property or for something for the future project. Um, once you realize, like, your the value of your savings is being eroded, the choices that we have as Muslims in terms of investing, you can't even put it in a bank where there's you're earning interest, right? You can't even do that. So how do you preserve the value of your hard-earned money? And that's where I think the other aspect of, from monetary perspective of this, I mean, I think as a Muslim, I've always kind of knew that, okay, gold is money, silver is money, but it wasn't. I mean, the only thing I was aware of is like, okay, jewelry for our, our mums, our sisters. But in terms of actually using gold as money and silver, that was became more of a reality for me during that time, and researching into different parts of the world, both Muslim and non-Muslim, using gold and silver. I got to research how to buy, how to sell, how to transact, and that kind of helped me in terms of being able to save money in using sound money. And I think um, that also led me to readily accept that opportunity to for the silver dirham project as well. And I was connected with the Murabitun movement as well. So those brothers, they were advocating for gold and silver as well, Islamic dinar and silver dirham. They had the World Islamic Mint as well, and there's communities in Malaysia and other parts of the world where they were experimenting and also promoting the use of gold and silver for transactions. And I just found it really fascinating because I can see clearly the problem that they were trying to solve. But at the same time, it was difficult because by that time, I mean, we are talking about not too long ago, we had already, the world has already became 100% almost fiat. So how do you, I mean, you hear a lot of people, even scholars and students of knowledge, talking about gold and silver as money, but there's very few people who, ordinary every day to day, how do you find people who would accept, apart from a very few people, a handful of people, or you have to find them online, or you have to go to certain countries or communities where they accept it.
We still
Uh,
have it in marriage, right? But
yes,
uh,
yes,
and it shows that in this important decision, and in order to preserve the value, women prefer to have gold, right?
yes,
It
that's right.
shows
So
like
absolutely,
that shows that they are making the right choice,
yeah,
while
absolutely,
we are engaged as men in accepting money that devalues day by day.
yeah, 100%. So that's a very important point you made. So yeah, even to this day, the dowries in the marriage contract are usually given in gold or land in some cases. I know that uh, there are obviously increasingly, it became more fiat based, but when I was growing up, and even in my own uh, marriage, made sure that the dowries, part of the dowries in gold. And I think even in zakat that I mentioned earlier, the nisab level, we're
Mm.
very much aware of, okay, if you calculate in gold or silver, whatever the nisab level, however you calculate it, it's based on gold and silver. So I think that's kind of um, always kind of been in our culture as well, from Islamic perspective, as well as even ethnically. I think coming from Indian subcontinent, that's kind of also still to this day. I think gold plays a big part in those communities. So it was easy for me to accept in terms of what is sound money and the problems with fiat. But I think the challenge was, despite a lot of people around the world, both Muslim and non-Muslim, trying to revive the use of gold and silver um, as a medium of exchange. I think with the digitalization of the world and moving to the digital space, it became increasingly difficult. Even though there were some innovative solutions out there which have
Yeah,
tried to use like a digital representation, or even before blockchain technology, like a digital um, using databases and tokens to represent the gold and silver so that people can transact online. It never really took off. Fiat,
I
yeah, sorry.
I have an idea.
Mm.
I'm not sure if it's totally correct, but I think the reason that we don't use gold and silver as a medium of exchange is not due to a a technological um, modern world um, problem, but due to the state making it difficult for people to use it and discouraging people to use it. Would you say that? Because yeah, would you agree actually to that?
I think it's definitely there's a combination of those things, and I think the state definitely plays a big role in it. And if you look at the monetary history, even the last 100 years, I think ever since the creation of the Federal Reserve, and then even the US, a lot of colorful history of when they had executive orders to, um, whether it was initially temporary, kind of temporarily banning gold, and then reopening again, pegging it to the dollar, um, and then closing that gold window, sort of 1971. That's definitely a clear example of state intervention, and for them, their ability to be able to print as much as they want, because that's probably the main reason, right, amongst others, where having sound money um, puts a limit or a cap on how many wars you can fight, or um, how much money you can print. because you've got a hard cap. So that's definitely a major sort of geopolitical state kind of intervention that I'm sure has an influence and impact on the ability to be able to transact, and then that's enforced further by putting taxes, for example, in depending on the jurisdiction,
mm,
where you live, right? You could have, like, for example, in the UK,
mm,
if you say invest buy the British coins, sovereigns or Britannias, they are capital gains tax exempt. But if you but silver, for example, that attracts a 20% VAT.
mm,
If you invest in other uh, mints, say the US Eagle or South African Krugerrand, Austrian Philharmonica, then you'd have to pay capital gains tax, if you buy and sell. So it just, all of these things put together, it just makes it a bit more difficult, right? So
I
and
think
yeah,
also like like in many aspects of our life, we give the state a very high level of trust, and we like for like in education, like for a long time, like our maybe fathers or our parents were and their parents, they were looking at a governmental job, a governmental education, um, governmental money as something very stable and trustful, and maybe like the neglectance of gold and silver came from this kind of worshipping of government,
yeah,
of and also comes with that like the like nationalism and so many other diseases that we have as an Islamic ummah, and not only Islamic ummah, like communities around the world have this disease,
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And trusting the government and the education system as well.
Mm,
By doing that, we've just accepted whatever we're taught, right? So a lot of the stuff, even from me personally, I've learned much later in my life than some of the basic things I should have. You'd think that our kids, growing up, they should know the history, or even from a very high level how money works. So even as an adult, and even when I was looking at Islamic finance and later Bitcoin, speaking with even scholars and students of knowledge, um, it was really revealing to me when I was speaking with them, and this is only a few years ago. People still believe that their fiat, their pounds, dollars, euros, are backed by gold. That if
mm,
they go to the bank, that they can ask to go to the Bank of England, for example, and let's say you took a £50 note, that you'll be given £50 equivalent in physical gold. And it just shows the lack of education and understanding of how the system works. And I suppose part of it is because they've deliberately made it very complicated so that people don't understand, and you only have a very simple view of it, the assumption, and you're not taught in school and college and even universities. They don't explain it properly, so people just assume, or like you mentioned, trust the government and the banks, that they must be doing the right thing. They have our best interest at heart.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
So you became interested in gold and started saving in it, I assume.
yeah, it's
And
more from a sound money perspective, and looking at how the fiat system works, the Riba fiat system, and inflation, and and although there's volatility in all markets, including gold, silver, I just felt, one, it's an anti-riba money, it's the original anti-riba money. and it holds value, proven track record over thousands of years, and those combination of those things made me feel like, okay, this is the right thing to do at that time. And yeah, so that kind of led me on to just learning more and more about, and it also gave me a sense of comfort, and knowing that, okay, even though yes, I've sold my house and I'm renting, um, I felt, okay, I've done the right thing, and Allah knows best. I felt the intentions there, and I'm, at least I'm actively have had made that move, and it just made it a lot easier to go on and accept and discover Bitcoin and accept it as what it is. And even though I know some gold bugs still struggle with the concept of how a digital money can be as good as gold, or can serve the same purpose of sound money. That research, and I guess the computer science background also helped to understand how more about how it works. And so yeah, it was just a case of learning from the early OGs, people that were on the shows like Max Kaiser, reading up, and some of the early pioneers like Andreas Antonopoulos and others. Um, it was really eye-opening, and it was also, I think, gave me hope as well, thinking like, okay, if I just, up until then it was like gold, silver, but it had a certain limitation in the sense that I could buy and hold it and keep it as safe keeping for, and maybe for purchases in the future, or passing on to my children. Um, but I felt there was certainly limitations that have been put in place. Whereas with the advent of Bitcoin, it was like, wow, this is something that we can really, if we enough people know about this and learn about this, then it has a huge potential for the future, in terms of becoming medium of exchange, store of value, and a unit of account in the future. So yeah.
How would you, for a Muslim who is not so educated in technology like you, because many Muslims accept the idea that gold and silver are the genuine money, and that the fiat money is just a paper or just a digit that's created by riba. Um, how would you approach a Muslim and convince him that Bitcoin is also a form of digital gold?
I think the first thing is to explain, or just talk about the fiat that they're using is probably 99% of it would be digital. And I think that's quite revealing when people actually understand that, or accept the fact that almost all of their transactions that they do is through some banking or other payment rail system. And we've seen, right, even though our time when growing up, we had paper notes and coins, at least you had some physical, even though they weren't backed by gold and silver, it felt more, that the whole notion of tangibility, and having some physical. So that would be one of my starting points, to say
Mm.
that, look, you are already using digital money, except you're probably using the worst form of digital money, in the sense that governments and banks can produce and have been producing as much as possible, and they are eroding your purchasing power, your wealth, and that's the first point. I think that's important, that they grok that, and then it opens up other conversations. So then they say, look, explain the nature of something that's digital. Up until Bitcoin, there have been many attempts at creating digital money, but they are all centralized. right? They are either controlled by governments and banks and big corporations, and therefore they have that full control and surveillance over how much you have, how you spend, and anyone who's had issues with the banking, their bank accounts, and or making transactions to maybe donations to some charities, or they've had their bank account closed, or even simple things like being asked or challenged why you want to take your money out, your own money.
Yeah.
You realize you don't really own that money, right? You have to ask someone's permission.
Mm.
And then I kind of start going into a little bit more down the rabbit hole as to why, and keeping it high level without going into the technicalities of the idea of digital scarcity and decentralization, and the fact that, look, we've got this system now, much like the internet. It's open source, no one really controls it. um, it's decentralized and it's permissionless, so no one can stop you and I from exchanging or sending, transacting in using Bitcoin.
Did you have
Yet you can.
doubts about Bitcoin before you fully understood it?
I think I was just very excited for both from the technical aspects and the potential for it, even though it was so small at that time in terms of having the number of people using and the tools that are available. And I think I was very fortunate to have that journey that I had until to that point,
Mm.
that I was just really motivated to, um, one is to understand it, two is to be able to use it. And that also helped, because even back then, some of the early OGs, just um, simple things like having basic websites to sell some stuff. So it became very real, where you download a wallet, you're able to send some sats to another wallet, or be go to a website and buy a book, for example, or even if it's a digital PDF that is put on sale, that you paid for that, and it just made it more real.
Mm.
And I felt, um, in terms of, I think, doubts, it was more, I would say, certain things that happened where, when you hear about things like an experience for yourself, like exchange hacks, wallet
Mm.
hacks, um, but at the same time, when you know that there's the protocol itself, the network itself is strong, you get these setbacks. So periodically you get setbacks, and we're going through something similar at the moment.
Yeah.
So periodically, every now and again, you'd find either there's, because of either someone hacked a major exchange, or a wallet got exchanged, someone, huge amounts of money got stolen, or there's some high profile FUD going on where mainstream media's maybe talking about how it's being used by criminals, etc. And then you take a step back and you look at the fundamentals, and then you realize, actually, these are um, early. I mean, we're still very early. These are sort of early teething problems, if you like, where the Bitcoin is going through the monetization phase. And I think it teaches us a lot about sabr, just like gold, silver, and then now Bitcoin, in terms of volatility and how early we are in comparison with the world's kind of money, if you like, and all the stocks and shares and all of that stuff is minuscule. And I think if you have sabr about it, and it have that very low sort of time preference, it's easier to kind of handle a lot of these things that people where who don't have the sabr, where maybe, even though everyone wants Bitcoin to kind of become successful very quickly, the reality is, it could take a very long time, right?
Yeah.
So as long as it's decentralized, as long as it's secure, then it still has that potential to become very useful, I think, to the ummah and beyond, inshallah.
Yeah. And like in Islam, we are obliged to uh, to strive uh, using ourselves and our money. And money was uh, mentioned 9 times before uh, nafs, before self, in the Quran, um, in relation to strive. So, do you think that this kind of sabr and having like withstanding the the beer markets, and because this happened also in gold, like
Yes.
for long time in the 80s, gold was down,
Yes.
and people who invested or believed that that the Taghuti money of the fiat uh, is worth nothing, they had a hard time sticking to their gold,
Yep.
and move.
Absolutely. And it actually happened in recent times as well.
Yeah,
When was it? I think 2002 or is it 2012? There was even in the UK, the then Chancellor sold most of Britain's gold, and it's famously called a Brown's bottom because it tanked the market. And even when I was kind of discovering it and using it as a store of value, I think between 2011 to until fairly recently, I would say maybe in the last 3, 4 years, where
mm,
along with everything else, it's just kind of gone sort of almost vertical. But there was a good period of almost 10 years, I would say 8 to 10 years, where it was almost kind of bear market in gold and silver as
yeah,
well. So that's fairly
yeah,
recent. But it's with when you zoom out, even we say this thing right in Bitcoin as well as obviously gold has got hundreds and thousands of years history. But even with Bitcoin, when you zoom out in the charts and you realize the volatility is actually more on the upside. But short term, of course, there's each cycle, each halving or cycle brings along its own challenges. But if you can survive at least one cycle and you go into your second cycle at the bare minimum, then it just becomes easier to handle those things.
yeah. I think the financial war on people is a very like is now the main war that is being waged by the Taghuti forces of the world,
100%. Yeah,
and we have to educate ourselves financially so that we can be doing the right jihad bil mal.
absolutely. Yeah,
Otherwise, we will be losing, and we will be also, if we accept riba, we will be, war will be waged by God
yeah,
against us. So, understanding all these issues is very, very important and crucial for the belief system of a Muslim. Would you agree to that?
100%. And I think that's another thing that really sort of played a part in my own learning journey, is to be able to teach that and spread that knowledge to as many people as possible. So
Yeah,
even very soon after, actually, I discovered Bitcoin. I think as early as um, once I kind of got an idea of what it is and how it can help. Um, since 2013, I started talking to people, some colleagues at work and some close friends, and I even found one or two people who were already sort of familiar with Bitcoin, and that really helped because at that time the information was quite scarce as well, and to exchange ideas and to discuss these things with people that you know and trust was also limited. So it was challenging, but I decided by around 2015 that I wanted to do something about teaching others. And that's when the idea of Blockchainology, it was formed as an educational side project. And by 2016, I remember buying the domain and the X account. I set it up. and I teamed up with one of my good friends. And by 2017, um, I thought we have to go public because it was like the height of the ICO craze and all this shitcoinery was going on. And we thought, look, we really need to explain to people what Bitcoin is, what are all these other shitcoins, and how they're different, how they work. And because all people were interested at that time was what to invest in, what which ICO project that will give them 10x and make them rich and stuff. So so what we did was we um, sort of basically use Eventbrite to have evening classes. So we did quite a bit of research, made sure we had uh, uh, learning educational material, both online as well as printed material, and we hired one of the local colleges, and we would have monthly sort of evening classes from about 25 to 30 people. So we did that for about a year, and it just felt like a lot of work because there was a lot of preparation, and it wasn't for the money. It was very small amount of money we were charging just to kind of pay for the material and the sort of college hire. And then we kind of moved more towards like smaller groups, like up to about 5 or 6 people, more private setting, and that went on to about, I think, around 2019, sort of just before COVID. And we also, both my friend and I, were sort of come from a IT background, so we got involved in some projects, bespoke custom solutions, like people wanted to know how to accept Bitcoin, how to set up wallets, strategies for treasury, personal treasury, and things like that. So we obviously couldn't give financial advice. From a technical perspective, we were able to show them um, the tools that are available that they could use to go on their own journey. So I had kind of had a pause, sort of COVID hit, and fiat life just took over work for both uh, uh, my co-founder and myself. And after a couple of years, kind of restarted, kind of looking at again from a private perspective. But I think for me personally, it was more about wanting to build stuff. So I thought, look, okay, education part was great, and that's something that's ongoing. But I think I felt more motivated to build. I was quite conscious that yes, there is a growing number of Muslims in the Bitcoin space and the general cryptocurrency space, but very few are actually directly involved in uh, things like infrastructure, uh, even the wallets that we use. And I became more and more aware of big companies and also both individuals and organizations that we are not aligned with, from an Islamic perspective. They might have different agendas, and even from a BDS perspective, from a Zionist movement, might be backing certain projects, and it just didn't feel right to be using or continue to use those products. So it was a case of, okay, let's look at what's available, what are the alternative tools available, and that also kind of motivated me to get more involved in trying to build stuff as well. And then soon, around I think 2014 or maybe slightly earlier, discovered the Bitcoin Majlis group, and
Yeah,
just looking at what some of the brothers are doing there, and yourself being involved in the Dallas summits. It really motivated me because when you first start something and you discover something, you're really excited. You want to tell the whole world about it, but then it comes to a point where their energy level drops until you
true.
find more people who they come in with fresh energy. And a lot of the young brothers and in some cases some sisters as well involved, and that really encourages myself as well to feel there's more people coming in, fresh thinking, a lot of energy, and that just kind of uh, got me kind of interested into kind of interacting with them and getting involved, and that led
MashaAllah.
to me sort of writing and publishing a book last year.
Yeah,
So it was aimed at kids, So again, there's a lot of thinking behind that because, especially with educating from an adult education perspective, there's a lot of material now available, as you know, both online as well as books. And I felt, okay, why make another book when it's just, you know, there's a lot already out there. So I thought, thinking about my own kids and future generation, I thought it's very important that we teach our, you know, younger generation about sound money, about riba. And as far as I could tell at that time, there's no children's book that combines those things about sound money, Bitcoin, and riba, and Maisir and Garar and all of that. And yeah, so that culminated in Bitcoin is halal. So
Yes.
which Alhamdulillah it's got translated into both Arabic and Bahasa Indonesia by a couple of other brothers. And yeah, so
And
the
I heard there's an Indonesian and Bosnian
yes, yes, the,
version even
yeah. So there's a
on the way.
Bosnian version in development, and as well as an audio book as well by some of the Majlis brothers as well. Pod Systems, they actively working on that project. So
Yeah,
just to kind of bring, you know, to widen and the audience and bring more people, make more people aware. And I think one of the thinking behind it is that if I can get kids to read or parents to buy or read this book for their kids, then they also are learning right about Bitcoin. So
that's true.
that was a thinking
And
behind
you
it.
have a book for adults or for families, right? Also,
Yeah.
how to live ethically.
Yeah, so obviously you've been involved in the Arabic translation of that. So we're looking at the idea was borrowed from Saifuddin's Bitcoin Standard, but we were trying to think of more practical ways that ordinary people can use Bitcoin, not just like investing for something that will make them rich, but how do you use anti-riba money for things like saving for Hajj, for example, or your kids' education, charities, and things like that. So how do you um, use it as a medium of exchange? So it was something like it was a free PDF that we created that is available on the Blockchainology site, and yeah, anybody can download it and then have a read, and hopefully some people might find it useful, inshallah.
That's amazing. That's a really interesting and amazing journey, Brother Ashik.
Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah,
And I hope we see you and in the next summit in London in
inshallah.
October, inshallah.
Yeah,
It's the 10th of October.
that's right. So 10th and 11th, I'm super excited about that. So uh, with the summit, as you know, has been 2 years running in Dallas, America, and I was just really excited for this opportunity to host it in London, in the UK. So just quickly, as you mentioned, it's October 10th and 11th. Um, and if you just go to Muslim BitcoinSummit.com, you'll find that it consists of 2 days. The first day is like a full day conference day, mainly consisting of keynote and panel discussions, and the second day is like a half day workshop sessions where we will go more deep dive into practical Bitcoin and the concept of digital hijra. So where we can look at alternatives for um, uh, so the tools that we use day to day, cloud tools, desktops, instead of using the usual Microsoft and Google tools. There are lots of tools available that are open source. Most of them are freely available. Productivity software, everyday software that you can use, email, more privacy preserving, and easy to host yourself as well. So
Yeah,
both sort of freedom money as well as freedom tools.
yeah. This is the exciting thing about our community or Muslim Bitcoin community, that it's not only about money, but also about all these amazing other solutions that free us from the Zionist control and give us sovereignty over our communication and productivity. So I hope to see you soon and
Inshallah.
see all the other brothers and that people come and visit
Yeah,
the summit
inshallah.
to
Really
learn.
looking forward to it, brother. Thank you so much.
Thank
Jazakallah
you
khair.
very much. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.